Dr. Olatidoye is, I'd asked him, invited him to talk to us on this very topic, differentiating ACF from other ministries. And the idea came from some of the information we gathered when we held our chapter presidents meeting. Some concerns on membership and going out to acquire membership. And I know that Dr. Olatidoye he and his wife are staunch ACF members in Atlanta chapter. When I say they eat and breathe ACF, they are committed to the things of ACF. Dr. Olatidoye has served on the national board in the area of capacity building for several years. And he and his family make donations to us regularly. One thing we can count on is when we go and look in our account, we will see funds from the Olatidoyes in the South region. So we thank God for Dr. Olatidoye. By profession, he's a cardiologist. His wife is also a medical doctor. And they are assets. When I say assets to the Atlanta chapter, they are indeed, and also to the South region. Anyone that has been to one of our marriage enrichments would have heard him talk with it's a lot of fun when he talks about those marriage things. I always wait to get to a point where he kicks in, and we love that. So Dr. Olatidoye, thank you for taking our time to speak to the South Region Council. I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say good evening to our National Chair and Secretary, to our National Board Reps who are part of this. Good evening to our regional President and executives, our chapter representatives, chapter leaders. It's my honor to be in your midst this evening. I'm really honored to be in your midst, especially after watching some of the things that are going on through the South region. It's really an honor to be part of this august body. I'm just going to share with us briefly some things that I think most of you have heard before. I think it's just an opportunity to reinforce some of those things. If I can share screen, please.
Royale?
Yeah, it should be available now.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we're going to be discussing the topic differentiating ACF from other ministries. And I try to approach this by asking myself some questions. So we'll try to answer those questions. So I said, why do we need to differentiate ACF from other ministries? Because it's important to know the reason behind the question or the topic we're discussing this evening. First, we have a specific vision and we have specific missions that we want to accomplish as ACF. And in order to be effective, you need to know who you are. I believe that identity is one of the most important things for any organization to be effective. So, and we know that our vision and mission statements are very targeted and specific. So if we don't know who we are, it's going to be difficult to be effective. The second thing that came to mind is that we need to differentiate ourselves in order to maintain relevance. I think there's so many nonprofit organizations in the US, lots of them. And many of them have good programs and intentions. And so what makes us different? If we're not really different from program A or B, why should anyone focus on us? And why should we be considered differently? And why should we have relevance in accomplishing what we say we want to do? Number 3 is to avoid unnecessary appearance of competition that limits our ability to fulfill our mission. What do I mean by that? Competition, when it's healthy, is very good. In fact, healthy competition promotes growth and development of any organization or individual. But what happens is, if you are creating more competition than you need, there's enough competition in the world already. We have so many nonprofits to compete for funds with, to compete for membership and attention with. So when you create an atmosphere where people are misconstruing who you are or what you're trying to be, and people that should be your support, organizations that should want to participate in what you're doing or collaborate with you, see you as competition, then it defeats our purpose. So we want to limit that unnecessary appearance of competition. And I know as I'm talking, some of you may be thinking of those ministries or organizations that we are creating that semblance in their mind. Number 4, it may expose us to more resources to fulfill our mission. How does that happen? If we identify ourselves or differentiate ourselves uniquely from other ministries, some of the so-called potential competitions or people who misconstrue us as competition, if they really know who we are, they may feel like supporting what we are doing, in fact, because if they see our uniqueness, they may want to invest in what we are doing as ACF. And last but not the least, of the reasons why we need to differentiate ourselves will be not expressing our uniqueness can be a distraction from focusing on our specific mission. What does that mean? Sometimes, as an organization, we can drift about doing things that are out of the scope of our vision and mission. Now, not all good things are expedient for me to do. In fact, there was something I forgot to place on this slide, the slides I'm going to show. And that thought is that activities do not beget success necessarily. It is not the multitude or the multiplicity of activities that really matters. Rather, it is the purposeful things we do. In other words, we want to be purpose-driven, not activity-driven. And the more purpose-driven we are, rather than activity-driven, the more we focus on our specific mission and succeed at it. The next set of slides is to discuss another question that came to my mind. Why do we need to differentiate ACF from other ministries? Why do we have to do that? Well, questions don't arise except we have challenges potentially in our minds. One thing that comes to mind is inadequate knowledge of our specific historical advantage and our role. As members of ACF, this organization is so unique. When you look back at the institution of this organization in '78, the people that came together, those students, there was a commonality. They wanted to remember Christ the way they used to do in college back home. They wanted to remember the values they were taught back home. And then they needed a community feeling to support one another. So there were specific issues that brought them together to start African Christian Students Fellowship that transformed into African Christian Fellowship. So, but when you look over the years of that history, what has become of us? A number of members of these organizations have become majorly influential, whether in churches, in ministries, in governments, across Africa and in the United States. So impact has been made by membership of this organization, more than many organizations, even though we are silent about those things. So it's important to have a knowledge of your specific advantage and our role. Number two, of why we need to differentiate ACF, there may be gaps in our leadership pipeline and training. What do I mean by that? As you come into this organization and members become leaders, because everybody in ACF is potentially a leader. And in fact, what I've seen is that this organization is a leadership training center. What happens is if a leader does not know the identity of this organization, the unique identity and purpose, it is easy to drift along and grow and flourish in the organization, and yet not be able to transmit that purpose to people that ask, or even within the organization. And so our uniqueness is not separated. For instance, let's say a new person comes to a fellowship today in Sarasota, and one of the leaders comes to welcome the person and says, well, we are ACF, like other churches, we love people and do missions. You know, if I'm the person that comes to your fellowship and I hear that, that already sends a message to me. And so the messaging of who we are and the understanding of who we truly are is lost in that conversation, because this person already said, like other churches. In other words, I'll say, oh, they're just a church. Well, I go to a church also. Why do I need to be part of this? The next thing is gaps in member orientation. I feel it's so crucial that every member of ACF should be able to, off their heads, recite in their own ways who they are, who this organization is, and share it with other people outside that may be wondering about what is different about ACF. There's so many professional organizations, Christian organizations, and what have you. What makes ACF tick? Every member should imbibe that, so that when they share it, it's not something it's not like you're memorizing something. It becomes part of you. And of course, the last but not the least of why we run the risk of being confused with other ministries is inadequate emphasis. If we emphasize who we are every opportunity intentionally, it is less likely that people are going to confuse us with other people, or we confuse ourselves when we message in front of guests and other organizations who we are. So enough said about the questions. Now, how can we solve the potential challenge? How can we consistently differentiate ACF from other ministries? And this is the crux of it. First, I'll say we must leverage our story. Our story is unique. And if you look at the history of ACF, we have accomplished a lot. But not just that, if you look at the concentration of professionals from all walks of life, concentration of Africans from all walks of life, I don't think there's any other organization this unique in the United States. I doubt that there are many of it outside the US either. And the accomplishments from the old to the young, and the transformation that has happened through passing the legacy and what have you, and the things that you displayed just this evening about Sierra Leone and other things we do across the continent. The reality is there are not too many that have those values. So we must leverage our story. Number two, we must know and embrace our unique identity. We are a para-church organization. It is not sacrilegious to say that we are not a church. And it is not anything bad to admit that we are not a church. We are a faith-based organization. We engage in Christian welfare, social welfare activities, and we engage in evangelism. But we are not denominational. We cut across denominations, and we are very unique in that perspective. And it's so important that we reinforce the fact that we are a para-church organization and we are not a church. Number three, let's define what separates us from the pack. For me, when I think of what separates ACF from the pack, I think of excellence, integrity, and compassion. Now, does it mean that other organizations in the diaspora or in America are not excellent in their own ways? Well, my experience tells me that there's a uniqueness of excellence, integrity, and compassion in ACF like no other organization. Think about Atlanta Fellowship. Well, if you attend an event with members of Atlanta Fellowship, you are afraid to come late because Brother Jegede is going to whip you at the door, and Brother Enefiok may silently not approve you for coming late. And so we are not latecomers. but really, it sounds like a joke, but the truth is there is excellence in the way we honor time. And there's so many other ways. When you have a tragedy in ACF, the love and compassion is unparalleled. And I can say that confidently with any other organization. So there are certain unique perspectives of our excellence, integrity, and compassion that separates us from the pack. Now, if you ask yourself, what will happen if ACF ceases to exist? That can be a reason for you to understand how we separate ourselves from the pack. Ask yourself that if ACF ceases to exist, what will happen? For me, I could be very sad. Why? Some of the best relationships I've formed in my life from Africa to now happen to have come out of ACF. Some of the best friends that I know today in my life happen to come from ACF. And I will miss those if this organization ceases to exist. Next, emphasize our unique mission. When you emphasize our unique mission, then you can consistently differentiate us from other ministries. The 4 core areas, as our president said this evening, those areas already differentiate us. When you think of building the family, when you think of building the bridges of reconciliation, when you think of passing the legacy, and when you think of reconnecting with Africa. In fact, I term that one of those 4 core areas as the core of the cause. And some of you may have heard me say that before. The core of the cause to me is reconnecting with the continent or reconnecting with Africa, because for us in the diaspora, whether we like it or not, Africa is our Jerusalem, just like Israel is to the Israelis in the diaspora. So when we emphasize those unique missions, and you all know about the 4 core areas, they are so critical when you strengthen the family and you build up people the way we do in ACF, when you build bridges of reconciliation and collaboration, when you pass the legacy the way we do it, you can beat it. Now, we're not perfect in all those areas yet, but it's excellent the way we do it. And then, of course, last but not the least on this particular slide is, let's not try to duplicate church. Yes, we're a Christian organization, but a faith-based organization doesn't have to duplicate church. one of our challenges and probably so-called competition is African churches, if we want to throw it open. Why do we see our best collaborators as, or why do our best collaborators see us potentially as a competition? Maybe in the way we message ourselves, maybe in the way we perceive ourselves out of lack of knowledge of our identity. One thing that I see will help us to strengthen who we are, because we are excellent folks, but intentional positioning, intentional messaging can make a difference in how we are perceived and how uniquely we display ourselves. Let us master our position and play it well. Let us specialize at what we do best and then partner with others in other areas. What do I mean by this? ACF is excellent at missions. Then let's perfect it and become the resource to African churches on mission. ACS is excellent in building the family. Then if we can package it to the point where we are so desired and we can serve as resources to churches and other organizations. I believe we are so equipped, human and other skills, that in human resource and other resource, to the point where we can easily serve as a resource to many, many organizations, whether they are professional or non-professional or non-profit, if we understand who we are and stick to our mission. We must update and refresh our tools, of course, in order to maintain relevance to the younger generation, and also to attract innovative and productive like minds. There are a lot of people of like minds, like those of us in ACF, who have a passion for Africa, but because maybe some of the little ways that we misidentify ourselves unintentionally, they may be drawn away. Some of them may come and say, hey, I don't need another church. I already belong to one. And some of them may come and say, I don't need another ethnic society because I already belong to one. Well, we're not supposed to parade ourselves as a regional or ethnic society. Anyway, we are excellent people. We don't see Jew or Gentile. What we see is Africans. What we see is humanity, and we have compassion on them. So ACF must become an attractive, sustainable, and formidable resource to churches and other organizations in our specific areas of focus. Let's not be activity-driven. Let's be purpose-driven. And we are doing great already, but we can become even greater towards our vision. So our differentiation must be intentional. In other words, at our local chapters, at our regional conferences, at our national gatherings, when we are individuals, our goal should be to intentionally message ourselves. Intentionally, I mean, if people are not comfortable messaging, then let's develop talking points for them when they speak in public in ACF, or when they when we host guests and people come around us. So there must be an intentionality to our messaging, and we must be consistent with it. And then our intentional activities, such that we are conscious of our core areas, the core of our cause, and what we want to accomplish, so that there's no distraction and there's no confusion of who we are. Rather, those who might see us as potential competition will rally around and turn us into their resource. And many of them may pour in resource to sustain and support our missionary activities. Thank you for listening. I don't want to wear you out with time. And Viva ACF.